Hello and welcome to Mettā Moments. This is Vincent, your host. Mettā Moments is a podcast series dedicated to exploring the practice of loving kindness meditation, or Mettā, with practitioners. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Benjamin B.I. Haynes. B.I. is a meditator, Dharma lover, ex-user, and also works at Dharma Gates, an organization that specializes in opening pathway to formal meditation for young adults. B.I. and I both volunteer at the Service Guild, where he helps organize Mettā Dance Parties. We had a beautiful conversation today. Let's dive into this Mettā Moments together. Hi, B.I. It's good to see
Hi,
you.
Vincent. It's nice to see you as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me on this episode of Mettā Moments.
You're welcome. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, it's been a few months now that we got to know each other. When I joined the Service Guild with Stashin, I was interviewed by you. It was a really great pleasure to meet you and learn about you and your practice, who you are. And yeah, now I'm very excited to have this conversation about metta and love and kindness.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the first conversation we had, and I feel excited to have you as a collaborator now at the Service Guild. So, yeah.
Wow, wonderful. Well, today's conversation is going to be, exploring metta, loving kindness, the Brahmavihāras from the standpoint of practitioners. And, I think it's really important for people to have access to information that comes directly from the side of practice. We hear a lot about teachers and what they have to teach us, and they always come from, the standpoint of authority. And it's really helpful, I think, for people to perhaps know more what it's like to start the practice, to be in the discovery of metta, loving kindness, and the Brahmavihāras. So I would love to explore your experience. And perhaps, we could start by introducing yourself to our viewers and listeners, and just take it wherever you want to go, whatever you want to share.
Great. Well, I want to start with some gratitude to you for hosting me today and for hosting this specific podcast. I think it's really needed right now in the Dharma sphere and the broader world of, like you said, from the practitioner's viewpoint and vantage point, is such a valuable one that is sometimes missed. And I definitely still am a practitioner, and in a way feel very early on the path. But yeah, just gratitude to you for hosting me.
Thank you.
So my given name is Benjamin. My nickname is BI. That is a name that was given to me when I was about 2 years old by my identical twin brother. So I part of my identity and karma and part of the way I entered this world is as a twin, standing next to, or really lying next to, my twin brother. He was born before me. He was first, and I was second. And his name is Furman, Furman. So around we were about 2 years old, and my mom was teaching us how to speak English, and was kind of, using some baby talk and trying to teach him how to say my name and me how to say Furman. But Benjamin it's a little bit of a mouthful, and he wasn't quite getting it. And my mom noticed that he was calling me Bi, Bi. And so that became my nickname, and is what most people know me as today. The current spelling, where I spell it like the eye of a bumblebee, that's a spelling that I gave to myself about 2 years ago. And that felt important because was a way of like kind of reclaiming my name and giving it to myself. And while I love that my brother gave it to me, that it feels um, a little complicated that he was the one that named me.
Uh-huh.
Um, like there's beauty in that, but there's also something that in my psyche like wanted to give myself that name. So um, that's a bit about my name. Um, I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. So I grew up in the South. I have three siblings, an older brother, a twin brother, and a younger sister. And yeah, I grew up in a family of high achievers, um, really good education, but the way to stay safe in this kind of family and this like corner of the world is to like get a really good education and then get a really good job. And it was like not it was like knowledge really was going to keep me safe.
Mhm.
And up until about 22 or so, that was I had worked hard to get into a good college and um I was that was what I was following. Um and then one summer, I read a book called 10% Happier by
Mhm.
Dan Harris.
Yeah.
And that same summer, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with my dad and my two brothers. Um, and it also coincided with a mentor of mine at the time who the words that he used were step up to the plate.
Mm.
He he saw that I wasn't trying as hard as I could in my academics and that I was at this time I was doing some drugs and alcohol in my fraternity and I had lost my way some and uh, it felt like this wake up call, like something awakened in me at that time of like a determination um, to do something with my life. I was kind
Mm.
of like, I really was like, I wanna go somewhere. I wanna do something great. And I've been given this beautiful education and supportive parents and like what can I do? And yeah, there's sort of a lot that happened in those subsequent years, but one of the things I ended up doing was inhaling as much like philosophy and nonfiction as possible. And I followed all of these things until like to me, it felt like the natural conclusion was like Buddhism and
Yeah.
Buddhist practice and the
Mm.
Dharma. And at that time, I actually I was teaching English in Malaysia. Right after I graduated college, uh, I elected to I chose to go to Malaysia and I applied for a teaching grant there. And um, that year was where I first sat my first retreat, and um,
In Malaysia.
in Malaysia.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so those are some starting places. That's a little bit about kind of what led to the Dhamma.
Mhm.
Um, from there, I want to share like my life now. That's about 8 years later, I I work for an organization called Dharma Gates.
Mhm.
So part of my work today is to open pathways into deeper practice for young adults. Um, Perhaps we can link to Dharma Gates and on the
Absolutely. Yeah.
podcast page or
Yeah.
something. We host multi-day retreats and do some other things for young adults. Um, and I'm involved with the Service Guild. It's a beautiful part of my life um, to get to work with Tashin and one of the things that I love doing, we were just speaking about before the recording started, is to host Mettā Dance Parties.
Uh-huh.
So there's a project called Loving Kindness Dance Parties or Mettā Dance Parties, and we organize them to spread as much love and kindness into the dance floor, into our dance moves, and outwards and beyond. Um, Anything else to say? I'm talking for a while here about my bio, but I want to see if there's just check to see if there's anything that feels left unsaid here.
Mhm.
Um, I think just to say that that love as a force has been a really major thread in my life.
Mm.
Now as I say that, it's I think it's a thread in all of our lives. So that's certainly true. Uh, but there's something about uh, as a young person, I remember being fascinated by like what is this force, and
Mm.
especially from my mom, like it feels like I inherited this gift, this extraordinary thing that was her love to surround me, and so I feel really happy to be sitting here with you today exploring this topic because of how important it's been for my life.
Well, thank you, Bi, for sharing about your life and your practice, your history. I feel really grateful for your service at the Service Guild and Dharma Gate, and I'll make sure to link that in the show notes. And actually, you started on a really great thread here, which is for me. I always like to ask, what was your sort of sense or quality of love and kindness in your cognitive development? What was it like for you as a child, before you knew anything about love as a practice?
Hmm. Hmm. Such a good question. Yeah. Um, well, as I said, I'm a twin, so uh, the first thing that bubbles to the surface when your question was asked is picturing like me playing with my twin brother, and there's something about playing that like it just it like permeated my whole childhood. It was just so much play and imagination and being outside, um and the kinship that I felt with him. Of course, as we got older, we there was some fighting,
Sure.
and we could talk about that, but um there's something like there was something automatic, or
Mm.
I don't even know if I like that word automatic. It was what's underneath, or like it was the baseline, and it was this like soft blanket of love that I could fall back into.
Mm.
Um, I I was a little critical earlier of my family and their achievement, but I should say like we had a very loving household,
Mm.
um, and so that's one thing to say. I want to come back to your question and see if there's any other little morsels. Yeah, I think about a couple teachers of mine, like school teachers, that were very loving, and I felt like I had a special relationship with.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's interesting because I've never thought about them in the context of metta before, or them like planting seeds of metta in me or something. But I see now how teachers, when they're really in their gift, are like school teachers. I mean, not Dharma teachers, but
Mhm.
uh, they they're calling for they're like calling forth something in the student because there is this unconditional wish for the student to be happy, and they sometimes see the student not do their homework or be mean to another student, or but they're like really looking at them with this eye of metta. And uh, that was really important in my development, to have a couple teachers throughout the years that like left some sort of imprint there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can definitely relate to that experience as well. You know, a few key people, you know, as I were growing up, was growing up, just really having this deep impact on my self-esteem, on the way I see myself, on the way, you know, they looked at me, right? It just transferred and sort of connected. And yeah, thanks for sharing about that. And about
Mhm.
your family, your experience of, you know, love and play, so important as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I wonder if we could continue towards, you know, metta and how you first learned about it. You know, what was the first time that you heard about love as a practice?
Yeah, uh, it was through a book as well. Um, there's um, a book called Mindfulness, a Path to Awakening, I think,
Uh-huh.
or a practical guide to awakening, and it's by Joseph Goldstein.
Oh, mm,
And it's a really kind of broad but beautiful overview of Buddhism and the Eightfold Path.
mm-hmm,
And that was where, and he goes into metta in the book and really kind of gets into the specifics of it. And I remember at the time, um, I was excited to hear that this is a practice,
uh-huh,
but um, it took me like several years before you know, I associated it as almost like not as real of practice as shamatha, or as like following the breath, or
right.
as vipassana.
Mm.
And that's, I think, something we see a lot in the especially the West here, of like, oh, like feeling love in your heart, that can't be like real meditation practice. Like, like that's just like good for you, or it's, we have all these kind of interesting uh, associations about it. So it took me a while. And I should also say, as a man, there's really a gendered component here too, of
Mm.
even though, like I mentioned earlier, I've always thought of myself as very loving, and love has been this really central thread. Um, the kind of like, the cultural expectation for me to be
Mm.
tough and not to be so open-hearted.
Right.
It
Yeah.
took me in my mid-20s, there was just a little bit of, I don't really want to I'll do this other kind of meditation, but like loving kindness is a little soft or something.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing about this. I mean, those two components, you know, one, the first one is that for some reason, maybe it's in the West or maybe not, that we tend to see, you know, love practice as sort of either adjunct practice or sort of not real practice. I definitely had the same experience, you know.
Mm,
When I practiced at my first retreat, to hear at the end, it was a going gap practice. Let's do a little bit of metta, and I was like, all right, I'll do that. Um, and then the component about, you know, what it means to be maybe growing up gendered as a man, and what it means for emotional capacity and emotional expression and acceptance, allowance. And yeah, that's definitely also a shared experience. So I think it's really good
mm,
to review those things.
mm,
I
mm.
wonder actually if you could share about how long did it take you, if it took any time, for you to really truly feel the effect of metta as you started to practice, and maybe you can go over that, when you started to practice metta,
Mm.
and how long it took for you to sort of feel more of the depth of it, the emotion, the energy, the somatic
Mm.
experience of it.
Mm. It's a great question. Um, well, hmm, there would be a couple ways to answer this question, but the first way that comes to mind is once I was taking it very seriously, it took almost no time at all for
Mm,
me to be really like humbled and blown
right,
away at the depth. And then it was around that time that a teacher reminded me that the Buddha taught love and metta and the Brahmaviharas as that can be the whole of the path.
right.
Like you don't have to do all of this other cultivation stuff around breath and deconstruction and like you could actually just do the Brahmaviharas the whole way and that could take you to nibbana.
Yeah,
And I was sort of like, oh, and it made me sad because we don't really get taught that here in the West,
yeah,
or it's
yeah.
certainly not in the ether that was the way the Buddha taught. And so um
And who was a teacher, if you don't mind me asking, that taught you
who
that?
was this teacher? This teacher was it was either at the time it was either Rob Burbea
Uh-huh,
or it might have been Ajahn Nisabo.
uh-huh.
I would have to go back and look at. There was a talk I remember I
Hmm.
listened to. I think it was Rob though. He
Yeah,
was someone I was listening to a lot at that time.
yeah, yeah. I had a similar experience, I would say, and, I don't want to be in the sort of business of trying to teach or anything like that, but I know that my experience of it is that there has been the Visuddhimagga, and then a lot of the treatises on meditation, and that sort of spawn all those like other practices. But I realized that when I started to read Tranquil Wisdom Insight meditation books,
Mhm.
and that the hypothesis is like all of those things, they are not the primary practice. Love and kindness is a primary practice, and it can take you all the way. I was very surprised, I remember. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, it was around that time that I committed to doing metta like every day for a year. And
Uh-huh.
I didn't make it my primary practice, but I was like, I'm going to do it every day. And that that led to some real shifts.
Mm.
And now where I find myself, really like this, I see the almost in front of me so much breadth and depth within the Brahmaviharas. And in a way, I'm like humbled by it. I'm like, wow, there's so much power in these practices that
Uh-huh.
and it's exciting. It's like it's really feels like a gift that uh, this is true. That it just like the fact that our freedom depends on love and goodness and
Mm.
feeling that like it doesn't have to be that way, but it does, and it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Our freedom depends on our ability, capacity to experience love, to love ourselves, to allow experience to be what it is, right? Reality. Huh. Love that. Thanks for sharing.
Mhm.
I wonder if you could go in a little bit more detail about that year that you started to practice every day. What did you feel was happening in you that you spoke about a shift in your experience, and share as much as you'd like on this.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Uh, One of the things that happened for me is that my metta practice took on its own momentum.
Mhm.
Um, And this was one of the things that really surprised me, where after I remember after around 2 months, without me trying to, like I had naturally come up with the phrases that really worked for me and that I
Mm.
liked. And I'd actually come up with this. I didn't really notice I had done it, but it kind of creates a song. Like there's four phrases that I work with, and they're not like the traditional ones. They're similar, but like the first two I'll share. It's may you be happy, and then the second one is may you be so, so happy.
Mm.
And there's something about it, like the so that I can like I really like get into, and like
Uh,
my mind and heart just like wants to like it just I want you to be so so happy for this
uh,
person. And so that's an example of like it felt like I wasn't controlling that process, but like
mm.
there was some kind of natural tweaking that would happen. And, and I still to this day, like there's like on retreat, especially, there'll be a new phrase or a new little tweak. And I'm kind of like, oh, I'm a little bit surprised by it or something.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. There, another thing that was happening for me around this time, I sat a loving kindness retreat, and uh, another like data point for me or moment when I was surprised by the depth of the practice is I was out in the forest during this retreat, and I was doing some metta for my little sister. I remember I was sitting on this log, uh, and she was in my like I don't have too strong of an imaginal like an ability to
Mm.
visualize it. It kind of ebbs and flows, but
Mhm.
at this time she was really there was like a really strong image of her, and I'm sending her metta, but all of a sudden she starts talking back to me,
Oh,
and she starts sending me metta and like telling me that she loves me. And I feel a little emotional, and like it just like I just remember weeping, like
mm.
something about opening my heart to receiving like the purity of her love, and
Yeah.
like really encountering or feeling from her like how much she loves me,
Mm.
and letting that in. And oh, it like there were just a lot of tears that flowed that afternoon. And um yeah, so that was another moment where I was like, wow, this practice is, I was like, just surprised. Like, this
Uh-huh.
is, um,
That's beautiful.
mhm,
And so that was at the beginning of your practice. It's sort of you described the phrases starting to take their own form and moving into songs and I love what you described like almost like that doubling down on intention to wish happiness and well-being and then receiving an opening to receiving love. I wonder in what other ways, did you feel your life sort of change by practice?
hmm, yeah. Hmm. Well, it was during this time that I had just started working for Dharma Gates,
Mm.
and uh, the yeah, my metta practice really enriched my work and like infused it with a flavor of like generosity and being of service to others
Mm.
was I was finding like joy in that. And on the days when it was hard sometimes to be on a computer and for it to be a remote job, and I felt that maybe disconnected from the Dharma, like metta was really important, and like like retethering to the importance of that work.
Mm.
Um, and there's so many other little things about how it affected my like daily life. Like uh, I think about my capacity to be patient with myself and with
Mm.
others. Um, like
Yeah.
when I'd be home with my family for Thanksgiving, maybe at the dinner table, and previously like little comments or even the speed of the conversation would have upset me or provoked anxiety. But because of my metta practice, there'd be these moments where during a conversation, I would almost just remember, oh yeah, metta is a practice, and I wouldn't like go fully into it during the conversation because that would be inappropriate, but
Uh-huh.
I would allow it to be in the background of
Yeah.
like this wish for all of us to be well and happy, and that like provides this padding, like this soft padding around my experience
Mm.
that was really supportive for me and continues to be.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing about this. I think I can relate to that sort of allowing of any experience to be whatever it is. If you are integrating sort of this awareness of metta, in your system, in your consciousness, while doing some other things. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Anything else that comes to mind, or maybe could you share, how your practice has evolved over time? So you mentioned a little bit earlier, that you started, metta practice, and then it evolved into this, song and four phrases that you use. But I wonder if you could describe in more depth the way that your practice has evolved over time.
Yeah, yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is that I now I don't really have a formula for how, like when I sit down to do metta, I, in a way, I'm like following some very natural intuition about what to do. And I certainly have my easy to love, like animals and people that I
Uh-huh.
typically start with. Um, but like this morning, I started with one of my close friends. He's been my easy to love being for like ever since I started practicing metta, and because he's an old friend of mine. But after like a minute, I thought of this other person, and like it's there was sort of this natural like
Mm.
switch. And whereas previously I might have questioned that or be like, no, I'm like, okay, the mind
Mhm.
is interested in sending metta to this person now,
Mm.
and it kind of takes on its own shape. Um, and then so that's one. A second thing comes to mind about the evolution around there are moments, and this is especially true on retreat, when the metta is so strong that it doesn't like I can kind of let go of a specific person, and I just want to radiate metta. And so I'm using um the contents of my heart and the feeling of it as the object of of concentration, and I'm
Right.
letting go of this like kind of bringing it. I'm not bringing my mind back to the wish again anymore.
Uh-huh.
It's like I can feel the metta as like this wellspring that is flowing, and it's like I've already opened the tap and it's starting to flow, and I just need
Uh-huh.
to like watch it flow and let it flow and attend to it. And it's yeah, it doesn't happen too frequently.
Mm.
But it's really wonderful when it does.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, so I guess in a general way, the evolution of my practice has been moving from like a formulaic approach to a more creative and intuitive one where I'm following my eros even. I might use that word, like my
Right.
eros for like where does the metta want to go today?
Mm.
And that is it's really nice to give myself that permission to do that.
Mhm. I really enjoy everything you say. You know, one of the benefits of recording those conversations has been for me to discover the creativity and the flexibility of practitioners.
Mm,
So it's really amazing to see how everyone's practice can differ and the shared elements to it. But what you shared about the, you know, moving from a formulaic to more flexible way to practice, I think is really needed for practitioners because there's this idea that, you know, if you listen to some teachers, you use those phrases and that's just the way you do it, you know. Especially if you go to more traditional sort of retreats, you know, there's really just one way to do it. So
mm,
yeah, thanks for sharing about allowing that flexibility and creativity into your practice, and I think it's really important.
mm. Yeah, you're welcome.
Mm,
It's been really important for me. So
yeah.
yeah.
I wonder if you could share about perhaps expected or maybe less expected things that have occurred as your practice has unfolded. You know, what are the things that you've noticed in your life? You know, you described some of them earlier, so you know, feel free to move on other things. But I wonder if there's anything that you can think of about that.
Mm. I do immediately think of one story, uh, the retreat that I mentioned earlier, where I cried because of my little sister. And um, at the end of that retreat, uh, I, uh, well, I should say that during this retreat, I sent my dad a lot of metta,
Hmm.
and um, he he and I now have a beautiful relationship. I mean, we've come a long way, but uh, yeah, it wasn't certainly wasn't my easiest to love metta object
Yeah.
initially, and one of my goals going into this retreat was like to really send him a lot of metta and work through that, and I felt like I did. And at the end of the retreat, I turn on my phone, and my dad has sent me a text, and he said something like, "Dear son," these are the exact words actually, because I it's he said, "I miss your smiling face. Um, I love you. Like, call me soon." And you know, it it definitely at this time it was quite rare to get that kind of text from my dad. Like, I miss your. I've never heard him say that kind of
Right.
phrase. I miss your smiling face. And I remember being overcome at the power of metta practice.
Right.
Like at that time and still today, there's no question in my mind about the link between the metta that I had just sent him for several days
Right.
and his he had felt something. He had
Hmm.
felt something from me. And that that's a really important and wonderful like point to linger on, that
Yeah.
loving kindness practice, it it opens up this aperture or even dimension of our reality
Mhm.
that feels a bit magical or
Yeah.
mysterious. And I I would wager to say like yes, it is mysterious
Right.
the way that love works. Like so many books have been written about the power and mystery of it, and it is this crazy, it's so powerful with this
Uh,
force. And so uh I really love the adventure of that. I love like the adventure of the way it like enriches, kind of brings um, like that's an example, but there have been times when like I've met someone because of metta practice or made a new friend or like, you know, if I'm like full of metta, then and I go out into public, like I have a great afternoon, like at the grocery
Mm.
store or in traffic or, you know, and there's, so it's really interesting to notice the ways that the practice like comes back into your life and really feeds something or like circles back. Yeah.
Wow, that's a really wonderful, perspective and experience that you've had, and I can absolutely relate to that as well. In my own practice, in the really unexpected way that it connects me to with people, even from afar. It's you know, it, I tend to be very skeptical, and this is one of those things where it just shows me the sort of more transpersonal aspect of love and kindness and how it connects, the permeates everything. Uh, it's undeniable. Yeah, I love that experience. Thank you so much for sharing. That's a very deep and personal experience.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. Yeah, it's meaningful to me.
Mhm. And I wonder how this experience, perhaps you can share. We can dive a little bit more into that. Perhaps there's even as a breakthrough in insight
Mm.
uh, about your nature or the nature of reality. And I'm asking that. It seems a little bit out of the blue. I just want to sort of frame it because to me, having those experiences sort of really shows me the value. I tend to come from a background of being much more separate from everything. I am separate from everything. It's a very lonely place. Experience depression or things like that. And as I opened up my practice, and things started to improve, noticing those things really confirm the laws of reality, of causality and connection and of everything, right? And I wonder if you can share about how this affects you, at a personal level.
Mm. Mm.
Can you share some about that? But
No, yeah, I like this question. It's it's having me reflect about the like the self-image that I had in my like early mid 20s and kind of this I had some self stories about
right,
being not enough and being bad and you know like a number of things that
right,
uh were there and then you know when I've been consistently practicing metta like especially on a retreat um my whole being just feels lighter
mm,
and and all of that self story image stuff all the ways that like is so feels so normal to me like you know that's all gone away and I
mm,
feel just like saturated with like goodness and love
mm,
and I'll say that it has taken time and it will continue to take time for me to calibrate to that because
right,
I have parts in myself that are so familiar with it feels like actually safer to be in the
right,
self story I'm a victim or I'm not enough like it feels that's really familiar and there's on retreat sometimes it's like can it be this good like
right.
I feel a lot of peace okay I got to rush back to the anxiety
Mm,
and um yeah I think what your question points to though is some um there are some deeper things Buddhism has to say about who we are at our core
mm,
as we both know and we normally think of like kind of drive vipassana practice as
mm,
the way to see into the nature of self and or like non-dual practice and doing that kind of awareness of awareness
right,
but like the practice of love just like shows you right away the ways that we are not separate And it's like we can, it just takes us to this place of deep love and interconnection that it just shows you it's right there. Like experientially, there's no way that we could want to be separate in this place.
That's
Yeah.
real insight. Yeah, I love this. Thank you so much for sharing. As you shared about this, it feels empowering, right? Because you realize the impact of your practice in your life, in the life of everything around you, like directly. And yeah, you can also start to bridge the divide, right? That I'm reminded of this quote that Tara Brach shares a lot, that the heart crosses the abyss that the mind created in the first
Mm.
place. And it takes time. You were sharing about that. There's all this sort of parts of yourself or myself that are still disconnected or still relish in that selfhood, that created them, that
Mm.
it's better to be, bad, or it's better to be uh, alone than to not exist at all, right? So there's an act of selfing there that is still very important to those part of us, right? But with practice of metta and loving kindness, those part of us can start to relax, and surely it's possible to be there all the time. I don't know if that's going to be for my lifetime, but I'll certainly try. Mm,
Yeah, may it be so.
maybe
Um,
so. Yeah.
yeah, I there's like you're helping me see, you're reminding me that there's this intermediate stage
Mm,
where those parts they feel like they're dying. They can
yes.
like it's like it's like the opposite of the light at the end of the tunnel. They see that like where we're headed
Yeah.
is they're like dropping away, their
Yeah.
extinction.
And
And
they
so
don't want to
there's
die,
and
right?
yeah, and so they like hold on really tight, and
Yeah.
it's almost like the intermediate stage is almost like more painful or something, or
Mm, yeah.
because you're really in contact with how desperate they are.
Right.
And um yeah, I'm glad that we've landed here
Uh-huh.
because this has been one of the, especially in the early days, one of the more confusing things about metta practice is that there'd be times when I would do it and I would feel a lot of pain in my heart.
Mm,
Still to this day, this happens
right.
like very regularly. I'll like go to do metta, and actually what needs to happen in my heart is like some karuna, some compassion practice for myself, for
Right.
others. Or I'm still able to do some metta, but like I really feel something
Yeah.
lodged there or something. And um I just want to say to myself and to you and to anyone listening that that is not evidence that we are doing metta and wrong or poorly. That, as we were just speaking to, this intermediate stage is when we're coming into contact with
Right.
some of these deeper beliefs about ourselves. And um yeah, that's both the power and the difficulty of this practice.
Hmm. Thank you so much for sharing about that, and sharing that with our, viewers, listeners, anyone that can benefit from this. I think it's a very important, we've touched on something really important here. I come from a background of, healing from complex trauma, complex childhood trauma, developmental trauma. And times again, I have to face the parts of me that are deeply wounded, right? And I've known now from experience that when I do so and I let myself re experience the depth of emotion that created those parts of me, right, that don't want to let go because they've been wounded and they need to protect themselves, is when really I'm doing the deepest work. And I'm not encouraging here, anyone to, you have to titrate, and you have to do it in a way that is loving to yourself. But that is really when the shifts start to happen. You are in contact with, really your edge, and sort of bringing your all of your parts together, into a more coherent self.
Mm. Mm. Well said. Well said. Yeah. Yeah. You speaking to that uh, made me reflect on the ways that I think that metta practice can be coupled with other kinds of healing work,
Yeah.
and they can work in tandem in this beautiful way where you can do some metta and then maybe you need to do some IFS or
Mhm.
something that is a little harder, and then you can kind of come back to the metta if it becomes too much. And um, there can be like it really pairs well with other practices. So
Yeah. Thank you so much for talking about that, because I think that's really important. A lot of people have shared about the impact of psychological work to their practice and vice versa, right? I wonder, I know that you are a practitioner of Aletheia, and I wonder if there's anything that you could share about that practice, and how it weaves in, love and kindness heart practice.
hmm. Yeah, I love this question. So I've just started the Aletheia Level 2 program, and
And could you describe what it is in a short
yeah, of
framing?
course, yeah. Aletheia is a coaching program that someone named Steve March founded, and you are trained in a modality to work one on one with clients.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a coaching modality, and uh, the 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 modality works at 4 different depths. So there's the depths of parts. That's like IFS, internal family
Yeah.
systems. There's the depth of process. It's
Mm-hmm.
like Gindlin focusing. There's the depth of presence and absence. This is level 3 or part 3. And then non-dual, the like depth 4 is just non-dual presence.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that Steve thinks about it and the program introduces it is for all of us at all times, like all 4 depths are present. It's just a matter of which one we are identified with, or where we're at right now. One of the things I most love about this program is that you can meet a client, you can start anywhere. Maybe with a more experienced client, you start a session and they're like, right, they move right down the depth of presence and absence. And you're exploring a specific quality of presence with them. Um, or then maybe you're down there, but a part gets triggered and you have to you do some parts work with them. Um, a big component of the program that I should mention, and this connects back to your question about metta, is we're meant to be in the poetic attunement with our client. So the poetic attunement is something that Steve uh, borrowed from Martin Heidegger, the philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
And the poetic attunement is distinguished from the technological attunement, which is where we, either with another person or the world, we turn things into an object to be used. We want to use them for ourselves or for the purpose of something. For the poetic attunement, um, everything is for like for the use of, or not the use of, the proliferation of truth, beauty, and goodness. These truth, beauty, and goodness are like a three-legged stool. Like you can't have one without the other in this model. Like when something is deeply true, it's also beautiful and good. And so the poetic attunement, like when we drop into it, we're just noticing what is true, good, and beautiful, like right here, right now.
Mm.
Um, and when that quality of attention suffuses everything, uh, there's certainly a huge overlap with metta. Um, I, you know, I kind of see the two like in relationship with each other though. Like being in poetic attunement certainly like helps with metta practice. Like it could, but it doesn't, like just because you're in the poetic attunement doesn't mean you're sending metta to someone, Uh, and kind of, if you're sending metta to someone, you're almost definitely in the poetic attunement.
Right.
Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question,
Oh,
but
that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, you could see my face when you were starting to describe that that present, that quality of presence is like, yeah, that's it. But you're right. It's different. It's not the same, but it definitely is the quality of um, awareness that is most effective and connected with metta practice, love and kindness practice. Yeah. Thanks for sharing about this practice. Looking forward to discover more about it. Sounds very, very interesting. Mm. Um, you shared a little bit about karuna earlier, and sending that to yourself. I wonder if you could share a little bit how in your practice the four Brahmavihāras, the virtues, divine abodes of compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity, how they sort of all weave together into your own practice. If you find anything useful about it, or
mm,
um, would love to hear about that.
mm, mm. I love this question. Um, I should say that I'm most familiar with metta practice. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's the one I've spent the most time in. Um, when I think about sympathetic joy as a practice, um, that's one that I very rarely do on the mat,
Mm.
but I try to make it a habit of whenever I hear about the joys or successes of someone else, of a friend, I like take a moment to really linger and be
Uh,
like, I'm like, and I'm kind, and try to find amazement. It's amazing that sympathetic joy, to me, it's amazing that it's true. That like I can hear about someone else's joy and just I can feel so happy. And it also often feels like a good antidote for maybe envy or jealousy, if or something like that. If I can like really find the joy in their happiness. So that's one that gets applied more in daily life. Yeah, karuna, I have a pretty good amount of experience doing that. It um how does it, I mean, I don't I don't ever usually practice them like back to back. I don't ever
uh,
like sit down and end up doing like metta and karuna. Um, I'm noticing that my computer's running a little slow. I'm gonna
mm.
grab my laptop charger real quick.
I'll definitely edit some of those parts to create continuity. So feel
Thank
free to
you.
restart wherever you want.
Oh, appreciate that. So yeah, how the four Brahmaviharas practice weave together. Um, for me, sympathetic joy is one that gets practiced in daily life the most.
Mm.
I when I hear about the successes or joys of a friend of mine who's just had something really positive happen, I try to take a moment to linger and feel happy for their happiness.
Yeah.
it's pretty profound to me that that actually works. Just the mechanics of it are something that's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
Um,
There's something about our nature, right?
yeah,
As relational beings.
right, right. Um, Karuna practice it's been important for me. It, I mean, in this time of the world with so much suffering, so much pain. So I work with a lot of young people,
Mm.
many, you know, folks in their early 20s who are um, having a really difficult time managing their addictions, and they have social media use and a lot of mental health challenges. So Karuna practice feels like such an important orientation for me to remind myself that uh, I don't need to fully take on the pain, but
Mm.
there's actually something I can do with it, and I can feel it. And normally, what happens for me is on the right side of my chest is like where the pain is,
Mhm.
and the wish for it to be reduced, the compassion is here,
Mm.
and sometimes like the compassion is like so feels so small. It's like the pain is like almost covering everything, but in the like there's just this very faint background wish for either myself or this situation, for pain to be reduced and for
Mm.
suffering to go away and for us to be happy. And it, yeah, it kind of sometimes feels like I'm holding on to this lifeline. Like
Yeah.
maybe I'm in a conversation with a really close friend and they're sharing something really painful. Like I can have this background, like it feels like a lifeline to me of I don't have to be like swept away by the pain, but there's like something I can do with my mind, an orientation I can take that is going to be helpful for me and for them. And is
Mm.
like a really good, it's kind of like a posture that I take.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So is there anything else I should say about Karuna? No, that feels complete. Yeah.
Yeah. How about equanimity? Is there anything that you you think about when we talk about that quality of awareness, of compassion, or
Mm.
no, it's not compassion, but one of those virtues.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a few of the teachers I've worked with have described it as the foundational Brahmavihārā. Like
Mm.
it's the one that can kind of suffuse all of the other three.
Yeah.
And I think of it as like a widening capacity. Like I
Mm.
almost picture a big lake.
Yeah.
And there's that metaphor of like a, I think they use like a pinch of salt will make like a cup of water like undrinkable, or not undrinkable, but it'll be very salty. But like a pinch of salt in a big lake, like you won't be able to notice the difference. And I I try to remind myself that equanimity is as an endless task in a way. You can have more and more and more. And then I notice kind of where am I at with my equanimity level? You know, uh, like being at home with my family is a time when I really try to do some equanimity practice going into it, or also just some real stability practice and grounding, so that I can have more patience and love in my heart, and I can notice if I'm getting activated more quickly,
Yeah.
or after a couple days, like something starts to chafe a little bit. Um, yeah, so that's what I would say about Upeka.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I think that I love that picture of the lake and the space created, the capacity. Yeah, love that. Well, I think we went through a lot in this conversation, but I wonder if you have anything else that you'd like to share about metta and loving kindness or the Brahmavihāras.
One thing I want to share is that the the friend that I mentioned earlier, who is he's like my close friend that's been my easy to love metta object for a
Uh-huh.
long time. Well, a year and a half ago, he had a baby,
Oh,
and it was this. I mean, it would have been. We froze for a second. Are
yeah,
you there?
we're
Okay,
back.
cool. So yeah, this friend, he and his wife had a baby together, and it already would have been emotional for me
Uh-huh.
if I hadn't been sending him metta. But I remember in like the months leading up to it, I like uh, was like picturing like like the two of them holding a baby, and then I was on retreat when they had him, and I knew like I could even feel that day. Like I remember like, oh, I think that that he was just born. And so um I feel a really special relationship with him now. His name is Berkeley, and he's a and I've joked with my friend like Berkeley's like taking your spot as like the easy to love person, you know, like he's just really cute. And um so I wanted to share that little tidbit. Um hmm,
Mm.
yeah.
VI, that was a really great conversation. I really enjoyed speaking with you today. Thank you so much for sharing about your practice.
Thank you, Vincent. This was a lot of fun, and
Mhm.
yeah, I really appreciate you having me on.
Mhm. May all beings be happy.
Hmm, maybe so.